if you leave trash, it's like weeds, weeds continue to grow, and the first day you might notice the trash, the second day not so much. By the third day it becomes part of the scenery, and before you know it, your platform is not communicating what your purpose is to the audience.
Hi, I'm Matt Egol, the host of the CX and Culture Connection, the podcast for leaders looking to drive impact by focusing on their customer experience and culture together. I'm excited today to be here with Lenn Millbower, who is the founder of OffBeat Training, LLC. And Len spent 25 years at the Walt Disney Company before forming OffBeat Training, and he's got a lot of great experience and a couple books to talk about. And I'm really excited to chat with you today, Len. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, this should be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Um, you actually mentioned to me in our earlier conversation that you started as a musician and a magician before Disney. So you've been in experience involved in experience in so many different ways. Tell us a little bit about how your own journey and how you started out and what led you to launch Offbeat Training.
Well, I'm kind of old, so that this could go on very long, but I'll keep it as succinct as possible. As a band leader, a musician, band leader, I noticed that I could manipulate the crowds in the nightclubs by what song we played. If we needed them to cool down, we could do something quieter. If we needed them to to, to be mercenary about it, to buy more drinks, we play some rowdy songs, and it was only natural then when I got very tired of the road. After a year and a half on a cruise ship, we just broke up out of boredom. I went to Disney. I figured I'd be a Disney leader, but Disney pushed me over time into training, and I quickly realized that the same techniques that I used on the bandstand worked for trainees, and particularly how music could help them either think or react or get excited or calm them down. And I did a presentation at the American Society for Training and Development conference in 1989, I think it was, and it was a smash hit. And from there, I just expanded into all the other entertainment things. That's why what I call what I do learnertainment, because it's the fusion of entertainment and a lot of things people remember emotionally negative things, but entertainment is one of the few things that people get a positive emotion from. And it's my take that if you can reach people positively, emotionally, you've got a chance for something to go into their long term memory. Without getting too deep into the brain science, I'll just leave it at that. And entertainment's one of the few things that creates that positive emotion. So everything I do is built around creating emotional connections, which made Walt Disney World a logical place for me to work. Because if there ever was a place that's about building emotional connections with an audience, that's the place.
You make a really good point, Len, that in the customer experience world, you think about the peak end rule, which is that people remember what is emotionally strong, what's meaningful and memorable. And those are the peaks in the customer journey, or the end is also very memorable, a good or bad ending. And everything else gets filtered out. And just like that's true in experience, it's also true in training and learning and development. If you have classroom learning, people may remember some things, but it tends to fade away quickly. And the more you have imagery and emotion and a chance to elaborate and to practice, it's that you people learn more. And so a lot of, what I talk about or work on with people and a lot of the guests on this podcast is how do you make it meaningful and memorable, and how do you turn, things into habits, and how do you make things stick? And it sounds like, you've done a lot of that in your work on training and how to make sure it's sticky and meaningful and memorable and fun.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I'm going to paraphrase here because I don't have the quote directly in front of me. Well, Walt Disney said, everybody else tries to reach them intellectually. That's a mistake. We try to reach them emotionally. And it obviously worked. I mean, the company's over 100 years old now. Now, what I've done in my most recent times as far as training, I'm not just limited to being a trainer. What I find myself doing is I go into organizations and I look at five things: purpose, priorities, people, platform, and process, and how they are appealing to the world emotionally, and how they are delivering a promise to people, really delivering it, not just promising it, and some sort of emotional connection that changes behavior. So, training and consulting and all that is linked together in this mix of those five things: purpose, priorities, people, platform, process.
And you actually call this your performance improvement system, I believe, with
Ye-
these 5
yes,
components.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I've had the great privilege of doing a complete makeover of a company, a 100 store grocery chain of 4,000 people, hospital system, a utility company, an insurance company, and others, and really revitalize them. So, yes, it's training, but it's much more than that. Really, what it's about is digging deep emotionally and establishing emotional connection, because people come back, they'll spend more money, that they'll become loyal. There's a model that Disney used based off of Harvard research, a for leadership. A great leader delivers a satisfying employee experience. Satisfied employees deliver a satisfying customer experience. Satisfied customers become loyal, come back, spend more money, tell others, and business profits result. And that's really the formula.
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked with a number of guests. In fact, the last podcast I did was with James Killian and Simon Robinson, and we focused a lot about leadership experience and how the formula for value is leadership experience value equals LX times CX plus EX. So
Uh,
leadership experience times customer and employee experience. It's multiplicative. The way leaders show up is actually what drives value. And training and development is key to that because if you know the emotions you want, it's human behavior that evokes those peaks, that gets you the peaks in the journey. And you have to train people to deliver the right behaviors that get you those peaks.
yes, yeah. One of the problems with training is it focuses very much on the objectives of the training program. And those objectives are important. After all, somebody's paying for that program and they need those objectives learned. The problem is those objectives don't matter to the learners. What the learners need is something that reaches them emotionally. An example I'll often give is a simple example. But if you're going to train people on how to log in and pay themselves in a new payment software system, a typical training would be, welcome. Today we're going to see how to handle screen A and how to handle screen B, and what to do with the figures in screen D. It'd be boring stuff like that. If I were to design that training, I would start with, what do you like to do in your own time? And I'd have them draw, or some otherwise really engage in something about what they like to do. And then I'd pull what they like to do into, well, how do you get to do that? And the answer is, you get paid. So you can go do those things. So today we're going to teach you how you can do more of those things that matter to you.
That's cool.
It it's
Yeah.
you're completely changing the dynamic of the training program then, and it becomes about what they want and not about what the corporate sponsor wants. That doesn't mean you don't do what the corporate sponsor wants, but you put it in participant clothes.
So when you think about purpose and how it connects CX and brand promise, is that purpose the purpose of the company or is the why of the person? Or is it both?
It is both, but ultimately, usually it comes down to the company, and Walt was amazing with this. Walt said, it's 3 words: "We create happiness." Now, everybody that works there knows, and I must qualify, I've been gone for several years, so I can't really speak about what's going on there, and these are my opinions, I don't speak for the
But you
company.
you call yourself a Walt evangelist, so you clearly believe in it.
I believe in Walt and preaching what Walt did. So, if you're a custodian on the street and a bird swoops down and knocks a hot dog out of a guest's hands, Well, you've got garbage on the street. So in theory, you're the custodian. Your job is to clean that up, but it's not really. Your job is to create happiness. The reason you have clean streets is because it makes guests happy. So you immediately then approach the guest. I'm sorry that happened. Let me replace the hot dog. You do whatever you need to do to make the guests happy, and then you clean, and you're still doing your job because the employee knows their job is not sweeping. Sweeping is the task, their job is creating happiness.
There's another custodian story when JFK visited NASA and asked a janitor what his job was. He said,
Yes,
we're putting a man on the moon." So the
yes,
janitor associated himself with the mission.
exactly so. So for one of the companies I worked with, it was a food company, a grocery chain, and they were kind of annoyed that Publix was moving in, and Publix positions themselves as local, and they are. But this company was really local. So what I came up with for them was we grow community. We meaning each department, the company, the community at large. Grow is not just feeding people, although there is that. It's recommending good things to feed and supporting the local community and growing each other, and community was where they are. And we grow community, repurpose the entire organization. And they still use it to this day. Now, one of the main reasons I bring that up is then therefore all the training is about growing community. So purpose is if you build a house without a good solid foundation, the house is going to get washed away. Purpose is the foundation on upon which everything else is built.
Absolutely. You know, a recurring theme on this podcast, the CXN culture connection, is the opportunity to reinforce the emotional peaks that we were talking about a moment ago in the journey through the right employee behaviors, like we've been talking about, and connecting those to mission and purpose. You know, you've spoken often about how Disney focuses on positivity, knowledge, and accountability as the core elements of its culture. You shared a story a moment ago, bringing that to life around creating happiness. How does Disney reinforce these behaviors systematically? You know, beyond kind of communicating the mission and getting people to buy into the mindset or the mission, how do they reinforce behavior?
Well, there's a number of things, and it really comes down to leaders demonstrating what they demand. So let's go back to that supermarket for a minute. They had decided that the employees would do the chicken dance anytime chicken came out of the oven. So I made it very plain to them, if the employees are going to do the chicken dance, the managers have to do it too. Because if the managers aren't doing it, how do you expect the employees to do it? With Disney, well, let's go back to that example of the hot dog spilled on the ground. Say that custodian was on Main Street, USA, and needed to get to Tomorrowland, and his manager was waiting for him. And because of this occurrence with the guest, he's 10, 15 minutes late, and the manager's looking at his watch and like, where's this guy? Where's this guy? Finally, he shows up, and the manager says, well, what happened to you? You were supposed to be here 15 minutes ago. And the cast member says, well, this happened, and in my judgment, it was a safety concern because of slipping on the pavement. It was a courtesy concern because they lost their hot dog. It was a show concern because it looked bad, and it was an efficiency concern because I'm late. And the manager's job at that point is to say, "Good job, thank you." Another thing they do is, I'll give you an example. The Tron roller coaster opened about a year ago in the Magic Kingdom. They had cast members come to the building and sign the pillars when the building was being built. So forever now, you'll have a guy who's 94 years old. Hopefully he's not driving, but going past the Magic Kingdom, saying to his grandkids, "You see over there, I did that. That my name's in that." It will stay with them forever. The cast members get to ride the rides before any guests ever try it. They host. They used to do this marvelous thing, and they've gone back to it. But they used to close the Magic Kingdom and reopen it in the evening for cast members, and it was very special times. Another time, I was at the Hoop-Dee-Doo musical review. It's a Fort
I've done it.
Wilderness.
I've actually done that with my family when we there's fun.
Wonderful show, best show on
Yeah.
property. But there was a table in front of us of middle-aged people, 3 men, 3 women, and somebody with the Disney name tag on sitting at the table. That was really unusual for them to have the name tag on, and the performers were making a big deal out of them. I found out later, a couple days later, it was in the newspaper and on the local news. That was the original cast of the Hoop-Dee-Doo from 1972. Disney had thought to take them to the show to celebrate the whatever 20th anniversary, whatever it was. Uh, It is showing the employees how much they matter, knowing their names, talking to them, having a daily meeting. And if you've ever seen that old show, Hill Street Blues, at the start of the show, the last thing the sergeant would say after the debriefing is, and hey, hey, be careful out there. Well, the Disney version of that is, and let's go make some magic. So if the leader doesn't do it, the cast isn't going to do it.
You highlighted a few things, um, that the leaders engage in symbolic actions. They do things themselves. If they don't engage in those actions, people pick up on it, and they definitely notice when they do it. They also notice when they don't. And they have to reward in a variety of ways the right behaviors. When people are clue conscious and they spot an opportunity and act on it, they need to be rewarded for that.
That's
Right.
right.
And the leaders, it's not just training, but it's it's habit building and reinforcing it through the behaviors of the leaders. Um, this is a good moment to kind of run a quick sizzle reel for the leadership experience. I mentioned the podcast I had last time with James and Simon. Here's a quick minute up from us on our leadership accelerator, and then we'll continue the conversation on the other side. Allow me to interrupt the podcast to share more about an exciting opportunity I'm working on with my friends James and Simon, the LX Accelerator. The LX Accelerator helps leaders close the gap between intention and how teams show up, focusing on opportunities like AI adoption and the linkage between CX and brand promise.
To understand more about how your leadership team can close the intention gap and scale behavioral change, we invite you to take our free cultural assessment on our website.
And we're really looking forward to sharing feedback from this diagnostic tool with you as part of a free debriefing session for those of you who complete it. It's a really valuable first step in your LX Accelerator journey and a great opportunity to learn more about the program and especially our unique customer centricity strategy framework and other tools that we'll be sharing with you.
We're really looking forward to the free debrief session for those who take the online diagnostic. Now, let's get back to the podcast. Len, I'm really enjoying our conversation with some of these real examples from your experience at Disney, as well as some of your other clients since you you launched OffBeat Training. One of the things, Disney is a magical environment. How do companies recreate their own magical environment that aren't Disney? What goes into creating an environment, the right
Yeah. Yeah.
environment
Yeah.
to so that employees can make the right decisions and be empowered to deliver these exceptional experiences?
That's very much what my consulting is built around, and it's purpose, priorities, people, platform, process. Now we talked about purpose. We talked some about people. The question you asked borders on platform, which is the least understood. And what I mean by platform is it's the stage on which your performance happens. And if the stage isn't good for the employees, you can't expect it to be good for the guests. The more magical the stage is, or the more I should say, maybe not magical because that doesn't fit every company, but the more in line with purpose that is, the better the performance of the employees matching in with that. I think I was kind of rambly here. I'm not quite sure I answered your question.
No, I think you did. And I understand that you approach this holistically. You have a 5-part system that you need all the parts are interdependent and go together. And that the platform is the one closest to the environment thing. I think you make a good point though. The platform on its own doesn't give you the whole experience. People need to be aware and of what they're looking for, and they need to have reinforcement over time when they see things and act on them. They're encouraged to do that. And there are different ways companies do it. There's no one
Yeah.
size fits all. I
So
like to refer to it as a system of change, and picking the right system of change for your
yeah,
company, not
yeah.
assume it's the same for every company.
So allow me to offer an example. As long as we were talking about the trash thing, I was walking back to the Epcot cafeteria. Now the cafeteria is backstage. No guests see it. Greg Emmer, the vice president of Epcot at that time, was on his knees, stooped down, picking up trash outside the cafeteria because it was a mess. And then he got on his walkie-talkie and he asked for custodial to come and clean it. Now, again, this didn't in fact impact guests at all, and he was still doing it. But it inspired me so much when I became a trainer for the land boat ride. That's a boat ride through the tropical growing areas. The first thing I would do is because we'd have to walk by that cafeteria to get into the park. I take my new trainee, we walk into the park, and I would look for the very first piece of trash I could find and pick it up. I wanted that to be the first thing they saw the new trainee when they hit the park. Now that's a subtle thing, but it sends a huge message. And I did that because I saw Greg Emmer do that. But if you leave trash, it's like weeds, weeds continue to grow. And the first day you might notice the trash. The second day, not so much. By the third day, it becomes part of the scenery. And before you know it, your platform is not communicating what your purpose is to the audience. And with their purpose being happiness, dirty streets do not make guests happy.
Well, a lot of what we're talking about is mindsets and behaviors rather than skills.
That is
So, like,
absolutely correct.
what do you see as some of the key shortcomings of learning and development or training, and how do you try to make it different given your philosophy?
Yeah, I think training is too often divorced from the realities. In fact, I wrote an essay once called "Oil" about oil and water, and the point was, and I forget. Let's say the managers are oil, the C-suite's the oil, and the training people are the water, and the training people sit there and bitch about what the upper guys do. But the reality is, training's function is to support the leaders, and what I would always tell my trainers at Disney and anyone who does any work for me or any of the organizations I work with. The one thing you want to happen when there's cutbacks, and there's always cutbacks, and usually it's a function like training that gets cut back. So the one thing you want to go on during those conversations is you want a leader to say, "Oh, we can't possibly do without Len or whoever I'm talking to." Why? Because they get results. So it's the job of training to align with leaders. Now that doesn't mean that when a leader comes to you and says, "Oh, we need training on how to effectively drive a vehicle," that may not be the problem at all. So it's up to the training professionals to have the expertise to look at the thing and say, "Well, here's really what your problem is," and give them the results they want, not necessarily the training they've asked for. And one other thing I would suggest is part of the problem with training is they take often we take a bunch of bullet points and arrange them in some sort of logical order and call that poof, that's a training. And it's not. It's a bunch of bullet points in a logical order. It's not an emotional experience that changes behavior.
Yeah, I like to start. I agree with everything you just said. I like to start with what is the intent and value you want to get out of the training, and then there's different occasions for the training. The training could be um, onboarding new employees. It could be people who are moving into a new role and they need to learn some new things when they move into a new opportunity. They either new hires or internal promotes, and they have to learn some new skills and orientation in a new class or individually. It could be because you're rolling out sales effectiveness training or a new customer experience program, whatever the impetus is. It could be AI in adoption. You're trying to drive training. It's not generic, my point is. And very often these trainings are not just skill orientation. You're actually trying to drive new behaviors. So given that, I think it's really powerful to start with what are the emotions you want? What behaviors are going to get you those emotions of the customer or the employee? And then how do you actually get them to think and tell stories to themselves and each other, and over time reinforce storytelling around those behaviors, so it's not doesn't stop in the training itself, it continues beyond it.
So, allow me to give you an example. I'll, I'll try to get this done as briefly as possible. When we were opening Animal Kingdom, the Animal Kingdom's folks were concerned that every cast member knew the answer, how to answer this question: Why did the gorilla throw feces at me? Now, they do that because they're protecting their territory. But the animal programs people were insistent that the character performers know the answer to that question. Now, the reality is nobody's going to come up to Mickey and say, "Hey, Mickey, why did the gorilla throw feces at
Well,
me?"
and Mickey wouldn't answer.
No, he wouldn't answer. He'd just go, but my leader was really on the spot because everybody in the park needed this training. So I repurposed it. The location involved was called Camp Mini Mickey, and it was an Adirondack camp where the employees were camp counselors. So what I did was I said, "Well, what would you do with an Adirondack camp? You'd go for a hike in the woods and you'd celebrate nature. Okay, so if we're going to celebrate nature, what we need to not be doing is be in a classroom." So this turned out to be an after hours hike into one of the kiosks the characters would use. And there were a lot of activity. We did a fishing activity that was actually a review activity. We even roasted marshmallows because by then it was dark, and we had the little steno they used to heat up food and banquets. And we told scary stories. And the scary stories were guest complaint letters. And the whole program was structured around celebrating nature in the camp environment. And my leader never heard another word about feces and gorillas as it relates to them. And employees, cast members, would ask if they could take this program again. I mean, that's astounding. How many times will a trainee want to retake training just because it was such a fun thing?
By the way, a fun story, Len, just going slightly off topic, but it's related in part to why I launched JourneySpark. I was at a training program which was outstanding at PwC called Make Your Mark, which was given to partners at a certain age in their career, right? And to kind of rediscover your why. It's not for people with performance issues. It's actually to all people over 50, or can then go to this program to think about what do they want to do in the next 10 years of their career to make it meaningful, to make it exciting, to re-energize their why, to spark interest. And I had a fantastic experience there. And a few months later, I left because I really thought so much about what do I really care about? I care about coaching and leadership and mentorship. And I wanted to work, and I love culture and experience and change, but I wanted to do that working more as a coach and helping companies drive work with their teams versus these big tech programs that companies like PwC and Accenture do.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so
It, it
it really motivated me to leave.
It's interesting that you say that because one of the classes I had to develop for Disney University, Disney Institute's the external arm. Disney University is for the employees. And this program was called the Career Life Discovery Workshop, and it was very much for the kind of people you're describing. But in this case, it could be any age, but just people that feel they're stuck. Because if you get them unstuck, even if they leave, the company's better off for it.
Yeah, I mean, everyone should be so lucky to work daily on something that they love with people they love working with. And I have great respect for the people I worked with at PwC and really enjoyed collaborating. But I'm having a ton of fun at JourneySpark and getting to work with great companies on culture and change and leadership on a daily basis. It's wonderful.
There's one other thing I should say that fits my bio and explains a lot of this. And that is that I went into Disney thinking I'd be a supervisor because I'd been a band leader. And I actually got to the assistant supervisor and stage manager level. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was my show, Cowabunga Dudes. But I actually got there, and then I lost the spot. And the company profiled me and said, "You need to be in training." Um, I fought it for about 2 months and then surrendered, and my career took off. And I didn't find that career. Walt Disney Company found it for me.
So, you mentioned to me earlier, Len, that you have two books, Care Like a Mouse and the Santa System. What do the books have in common and what's different about them?
Yeah, they preach the same message. The purpose, priorities. Priorities, by the way, are how you decide what to do next. People is how you treat people and your expectations of people and the leaders and the employees and the guests. Platform we've talked about, and process. Process is the great destroyer. If you don't get process right, nothing else works. And Disney is marvelous at improving process year after year after year. So both books, Care Like a Mouse talks about how Walt and Roy did it. The Santa System, it takes that same the same methods and leadership lessons and customer service lessons and employee treatment lessons, motivation and all that, and puts it in the fictional context that I visited the North Pole. And it was an intellectual exercise, actually asking myself, well, if there really was a North Pole, how would it run? So I had to figure it all out. Figured out a lot of, like, for instance, reindeer don't have antlers. Male reindeers don't have antlers in December, so the reindeers pulling the sleigh can't be male reindeers. So what about Rudolph then? Well, then Rudolph is really Ruby. And how did that bright nose come about? She wears a ruby diamond in her nose. Uh, and I figured out how the whole Christmas Eve roof run works, and it basically is Carol Like a Mouse, only put in a fictional context, because sometimes people respond better to a um, fictional story that has truisms in it than they respond to the hard cold facts
It's a
facing them.
fun way to tell a story and get the concepts across.
Yeah, so the books have the same messages. It's just one is in the fantasy realm and the other's in the magical fantasy realm.
Do do you think of what you're doing as being a catalyst for culture change?
I do. I hope I am. It's hard to have an organization understand they need a culture change. Often, what I find, the organizations I work with are what used to be mom and pop companies who have grown up, and all of a sudden they're bigger than they can handle, and not everybody can talk to the CEO anymore, and so they all of a sudden they're thinking, man, we got to get our act together and figure out what we really believe. And at that point is the ideal point to pour the concrete of a foundation. And so that's what I work with a lot. It's very rewarding.
What's usually the catalyst for you to get involved with a company? Why did they reach out?
Well, each one is different, but for instance, an insurance company I worked with, they had like 15 behaviors they expected their employees to follow. And nobody could understand any of it. And the different departments had different standards for how things should be done. And there wasn't any underlying purpose. And they thought that maybe somebody with some Disney experience could help them. And they reached out to the hospital system I previously helped. And the CEO said, you need to bring this guy in.
Yeah, usually I find that there's fewer than 10, right? At PwC, when I was part of the Katzenbach Center, we called it the critical few. It was like, what are the critical few behaviors to get the leaders aligned around and then to build a cultural movement in the organization? I was like one of the champions for the Katzenbach Center on digital and customer experience. A lot of the other partners, I started out doing work in digital and brought into customer experience because digital is about experience, personalization, loyalty, commerce. They're all experiences. And I brought it in to make it phygital. And so I ended up becoming an experienced person, having started in digital and retail and then brought it over time. And got very closely involved in this cadre of people who worked on culture. A lot of the other people worked on workforce transformation or post-merger integration or cost programs or technology programs. And I was coming in from the experience lens. It was a great group of people to work in, but we focused a lot on the critical few behaviors. Some companies like Ritz-Carlton have 22 behaviors, and the only
Yeah.
way they can get that many behaviors across is through the daily stand-up and rotating across them over time. No one can remember all 22. They have to carry a card around with what the 22 behaviors are.
Yeah, so this insurance company, and I see we're running short on time, so I'll do this really quickly. They all talked about they loved each other. It was like a neighborly experience, and so I took their 12, 15 behaviors and narrowed them down to the neighborhood watch because they're all part of the neighborhood, and so I think it was welcoming, authentic, truthful. I don't remember the other 2 right now, but often with these organizations, it's not that they're broke, it's that they're so busy taking care of the day to day that they don't have the time to see the big picture. It's kinda like they're seeing the trees and not the
You know what
forest.
makes it easier? Like you just had a framework. If there's a simple acronym or mnemonic about the 5 or 6 behaviors, like, that where there's a word that they spell, right? Like, I also find that if you link the behaviors to the emotions that you want to
Yep,
drive, people remember
yep,
them better. And it
yep.
also makes it easier to spot stories of where you're doing or not doing the behaviors and the emotions you're. By the way, you can then tailor your customer listening to see whether you're getting the emotions and the behaviors. So there's a lot you can do once you align on the behaviors you want.
Yeah, now
Um,
and this organization, they had 1, ONE, in their name, and it was spelled in capital letters where the rest of the logo was not. So I changed that to stand for Outstanding Neighborhood Experience.
that's great. That's
And
great.
you see, everything just kinda it fit together like a tightly knitted quilt once it was done.
Len, we could keep going. It's a really fun conversation. I know you've sparked a lot of great ideas for me. I'm sure you have for the audience. If
I hope
folks
so.
want to, I'm sure you have. I look forward to looking at your books. If folks want to get in touch with you, is LinkedIn the best way? Is it the Offbeat Training website? How can people best reach out?
LinkedIn works. The Offbeat Training website is just that. It's offbeattraining.com, and everything is there, everything I offer. You can email me directly, Len with 2 N's, Lenn, at offbeattraining.com. Any of those 3 would work, and I love to talk to people, so reach out.
Thanks for coming on the show, Len.